Welcome to the Australian Institute of Business Career Under Construction webinar series, which was established to help our MBA community advance their career and employment opportunities through leveraging their MBA credentials, confidence, and network. AIB is Australia's market-leading, fully online private higher education provider, boasting a student and alumni network of more than 20,000 from 100 countries. The majority of those are residing in Australia and Canada. Our infinite game is to transform the lives of everyday working professionals through career-enhancing credentials. I'm Dr Alicia Stanway, Senior Lecturer and Industry Engagement Manager, and I'm delighted to be joined virtually by three AIB alumni who will share their entrepreneurial journeys. As the Practical Business School, AIB is committed to equipping its community with real-world strategies to help you achieve your career goals. Our topic, how to turn your startup idea into a sustainable reality. Bringing together expertise in medtech, circular economy, and risk advisory, our executive panel have successfully launched and scaled their ventures. So in this webinar, they'll share their personal insights into turning ideas into action, navigating risk and reward, and leveraging their MBA experience to build sustainable startups. So let's meet our panel. We have Megan Jones, 2018 AIB alumni, CEO and co-founder of industry-led Circular PV Alliance, which was established with a mission to transit the solar energy sector into a circular economy. We have Gibran, Maher, 2021 AIB alumni, CEO and co-founder of Additive Surgical, a leading company in Australia that specialises in research and development and manufacturing of 3D printed titanium spinal implant technologies. I can't wait to see it in a moment, Gibran. Ken Letander, 2024 AIB alumni, business owner of Strat Incorporated, a Canada-based risk management advisory that specialises in risk management planning, strategic planning, Indigenous relations and marketing. Now, Ken is a trusted advisor in de-risking those business plans, as well as helping companies design and market Indigenous procurement and recruitment plans across Canada. Welcome to our panel. Megan, let's begin with you. Now, your story is a powerful example of what happens when passion meets the right audience. So tell us, how did a LinkedIn post lead you to being named as one of Australia's top 100 green energy players?
Thanks, Alicia. I love that question, and I love the way you frame that, because it is honestly so true. It's like everything that happened up to a point in life, you know, prepares you for something when it comes around, and that's exactly what happened. So I guess Circular PV Alliance as an entity is a result of a LinkedIn post that kind of went a bit rogue. Essentially, someone posted on LinkedIn a photo of a pile of solar panels at their tip with a tagline, "Surely we can do better than this." And at the time, I was studying my MBA at AIB on solar recycling as an emerging business opportunity. So I was like, right place, right time. And I reached out to the LinkedIn poster and said, actually, yes, you know, we can do better, and people are, or I am at least, trying to do better in that way. So an informal working group was formed with a few other people that also reached out. And fast forward a couple of years, Circular PV Alliance was an incorporated public entity with a board of directors, lots of, you know, legal obligations and all that. I wrote a report that got picked up around the world. I won an award, and that really put us on the map. And what we were talking about was a side of the solar energy industry that was rarely discussed. And I think daring to open the conversation up and actually be part of the solution of this kind of dark side of solar was what really put me on the list.
Beautifully articulated. All right, Ken, and we're going to circle back. Ken, you're a trusted risk management advisor in Canada. Can you share the story behind Strat Incorporated? What inspired its creation?
Thank you. I think what started the concept of Strat First was strategy first, and so Strat First is short for strategy first. I've worked in government, I've worked in community, I've worked in private sector, engineering, some nuclear projects also. And while some companies are really good at being proactive, sometimes things get responded to at the 11th hour. And I really felt some strategy needed to be put into place in a variety of different circumstances when industry is working with community or governments working with community. And so there was really no space where people were tying in risk management, marketing, and community engagement. And so there was a bit of a niche there. So I thought, let me see what I can do. I have a passion for marketing. And so really I wanted to build that out and just see what the appetite for people were to be a little more proactive so businesses, communities can also participate in opportunities.
And the graphic behind you, is there a story to that?
Yeah, so what we do, part of our business is adding in art into picture or into storytelling in business. So to drive authenticity, to drive brand awareness. So this one here was designed for TELUS. It's a Canadian mobility company with offices in the US, also I believe in Australia. And so they needed something to communicate their brand for an Indigenous relations report across Canada. So they came to me, they commissioned me to do some artwork. And so a lot of what we do, part of our artwork is you need to tell a story about a business case, about a risk, about de-risking, and how, is there pictures that support that? And so I'm the person that sometimes people come to when they have a complex description that they need. I help design that, and then they use the picture for their marketing down the road.
All right, Gibran, let's roll over to you. So your curiosity, this is how I see it, sparked an innovation that helped bring clinician-led medical manufacturing back, I believe, from Europe to Australia. So can you share the story behind working with some of the best surgeons in Australia, spinal surgeons?
Absolutely. Thank you, Alicia. Yeah, it's an exciting story, having a deep and rich history in medical technology. We don't manufacture a lot of it here in Australia, although we have all the skills and know-how and capability too. So, I started doing my MBA, and I was thinking and talking with some of my clinician friends and saying, well, why don't we make more of this here? Why do we import 90% of our medical devices into this country? Where by contrast, you look at the US and they import less than 20%. You look at Germany, they import less than 15%. But here in Australia, we're more than 90%. So then COVID came along, right? And we couldn't get any face masks. We couldn't really have sovereign capability or capacity for some of our medical products. And it sort of struck a chord with me and a chord with some of the clinicians that I work very closely with that, well, we need to have sovereign capability and sovereign capacity, particularly in life-saving devices and medical technology. So throughout my MBA, that's what I focused on is 3D printed titanium implants, which is on the right side of technology. We're really seeing additive manufacturing or 3D printing transforming orthopedic implants and orthopedic reconstructive surgeries. So it was really a culmination of COVID highlighting our desperate need for sovereign capability. The clinicians that I do work with, wanting to have clinician-led design of new medical devices where, who better to design medical devices than the ones that use them, the surgeons and clinicians themselves. So to have a really clinician-centric design team was exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the facilitator to take their best-in-class ideas, make it into new medical devices, and then manufacture them here in Australia, get them regulatory approved, and then start exporting them all around the world while building our local manufacturing supply chain and ecosystem here. So that's what we did. It's been a tough 4 or 5 years. It's been, there's been some heartache and some sweat and tears and some, are we going to make it? But we've now sort of come out the other side where we're reaching a scale-up stage. We've got our products going through regulatory processes now. So it's been a wonderful journey, and I'm just really proud that we can do this in Australia, where we just don't do it enough.
Thank you. Look, I don't believe that launching any business is always smooth sailing. So some of those peaks and troughs that you've touched on there, we're going to unpack those a little bit further. Just for the sake of our audience, can I get each of you to explain how long? When did you start your companies? I believe we're all around 2 to 4 years. Can you just confirm that for me?
Yeah, I started my company about 3.5 years ago. It seems like a bit of a blur in terms of when we started it. So I was working for an engineering firm at the time, and then I went through the process to let them know I had a business, and so what we did was we were just a sole proprietorship. So I was the sole proprietor, and then every time we would get some money, pay the taxes, and then reinvest that back into the business. And then we became federally incorporated about 2 years ago, so we can do business and preserve our name across Canada.
Yeah, I guess a similar time frame as well. The informal working group started in June 2021, and by the time we were officially incorporated as a public entity was, I think, October or November 2021 as well.
A similar time frame here. The official incorporation of the company was in 2021. I've been working on it since 2019, and now we're going strong in 2025.
Isn't it interesting how it seemed like, and I dare say it, there was a little pandemic going around. It seemed to be an inflection point for a number of businesses. All right, I'll leave that seed there. Ken, I'm going to kick off with the first question with you. So look, at AIB within our community, around 25% of our alumni are business owners. That for me is a real testament to the entrepreneurial potential and strong drive for that venture creation within our community. So when committing fully to a startup, what key, and I want to start with the non-financial resources, should be in place to support that success? And I'm going to go around the panel and we can talk anything about from the trusted advisors, legal counsel, that clear value proposition, network board of directors in Megan's case. Ken, let's start with you. What non-financial resources need to be in place in your case when launching or scaling a consultancy?
Yeah, I would say learning about insurance between when you start going into a different tax bracket, those are some of the things that you don't necessarily learn because it changes from country to country, from province to province. And so someone else might have some advice, but you always have to find that right person who's living and breathing in that space. So finding the right kind of accounting system that works for you, so you can track your invoices out, your money in. Those are those little things that's so easy to forget about, who owes money or where you have to pay an invoice to. Intuition. And so really building out your network, learning about intuition, where you're in a circumstance where a business opportunity seems really good, but there's that little voice in you that says you just need to walk away. And sometimes it's hard to walk away. So building out that intuition and I guess knowing about the red flags. So you have to protect yourself and your business and your assets. I would say one of the things that's really important to me is also brand champions. So people who you're going to know in your network who are going to help champion your business outside, and having people that you can go to, because being an entrepreneur, sometimes it's really difficult. You can't phone people in the business world and say, this is my challenges, because not everyone has been an entrepreneur and knows those stresses. So finding people you can lean on to, that's something that's, you can't put a price tag on that, because some days you just want to quit your business in some cases, and there's those people that say, just hang on for a little longer and it's worth it.
Uh, that was great. I resonate with all that, Ken. A couple of things I would throw in there, apart from like the usual kind of legal and accounting advice to make sure you're set up properly. Totally, you have to have that champion or that lone nut. If you've ever seen that dancing video, that was me. You need someone to really drive it. When you're setting up your organization, depending on your structure, you might have an official board of directors, so you need your director's ID and all those kind of things. We had 4 people that were willing to become that board of directors and have those legal obligations as well. And some of the others in the working group went on to become technical and strategic advisors. So that was kind of an expanded working group, a network we could draw on as well. One of the main things I just wanted to say too, though, was it was really worthwhile to invest in an external person that was good at branding or graphic design to come up with your brand from a practical sense. Sometimes, and you see it all the time, people get caught up in the brand and the logo and the colors and like that, bury themselves in the details of getting the right look for the business, right? And we did that to a point, and then I was like, hang on, let's just outsource that. And no matter how good you think your idea is, when you have a professional person do it that has that creative lens, it's just 1,000 times better. Well, in our case, and like anything we could come up with. ourselves, and it was such a worthwhile thing to do.
About drawing on those strengths, isn't it? Gibran, before we jump to you, Megan, can I just ask, you ended up with 4 in your board of directors. Did you start with 4? How did you get, why 4? How did you land on the 4?
So there were some legal reasons behind the number, and we needed 3 as per our constitution. But I asked for 4 because I was kind of leading the group, and I thought if I say we need 4, we're going to at least get 3. So it was just, and then 4 actually, all 3 others put their hand up, and I'm like, okay, great, so we're okay. So that was the reason behind that.
I really agree with what Ken and Megan have said. You know, from my perspective, you know, the brand champion story is a really, really important piece. Looking at sort of medical device manufacturing, the startup capital needed to actually to get there is significant. And so for me, it was about eyes wide open. You know, I had to know and have a very, very solid idea of what my runway looked like, right? You know, if I had to raise capital, I had to put everything together. But for me, the number one piece of intelligence that was most important is knowing how long it's going to take, how much money will it need to be able to get there. So it was, you know, looking at getting a medical device to market, the actual designing of the device, like an engineer to design a spine implant, you know, this is a picture of what a typical spine implant looks like. It's a 3D printed lattice structure. You know, you can design that in a day. You can then print it in a couple of days. But then there's about $10 million worth of testing and about 4 years that you need to get it to market. So in the life cycle of getting that little piece of metal to market in a sterile box to be able to fix someone's back, you know, it's 2 or 3% is the design work. The rest is verification, validation, and regulatory and quality. So, you know, knowing that and being very explicit and clear about that to our clinical group, to our investors, was the most important thing for me, because it's not done a lot in Australia. We don't manufacture a lot of implantable medical devices here. And so the general understanding from the capital markets based in Australia of how to get a medical device to market was quite poor. So, you know, for me, it was around that education piece that, you know, this is going to take 4 to 5 years and it's going to cost, you know, around $10 million to actually get there was a really key piece of information that was critical to convey to our clinical advisory group, our board of directors, Capital Works. So yeah, for me, that was one of the biggest parts. Also having a clinical advisory group that are highly experienced was another sort of non-financial input that needed to be done very well. So having surgeons advise you on what the design inputs of a medical device should look like is completely necessary. Whereas some of the large medical device companies might have, you know, a chief engineering officer and they go, we made this and it's fantastic, everyone should use it. Whereas having truly clinician-led design of medical devices is where it should be. So that was another, you know, hard stop for me, that we have to be clinician-led as far as our design and development goes.
Now, your funding situation is significantly different amongst the panel here. Talk us through, is it shareholders, board of directors, who's helping to raise that initial capital in your case?
So for Additive Surgical, we obviously had to raise capital because it's such a capital intensive pathway to market. It was actually pretty difficult, to be honest. The capital markets in Australia are very conservative and they're not highly educated around medtech. So I found it very challenging in getting that buy-in, getting our pre-seed and seed investment on board. It took 1.5 years, 2 years. You know, for me, it was a big challenge. You know, it was every day is, am I going to get there? You know, I had to go all in. I wasn't drawing an income, and it was like, I've just got to go for this. It's all or nothing. And, you know, that was my risk appetite, right? It's like, I'm all in. Let's go. Let's build a proof of concept. As soon as we do that, we'll build confidence that we can actually bring this to market. So for me, it was a pretty big challenge. Having a lot of the the detailed investor memorandum, having a very detailed plan of exactly how we're going to get to market, having a pathway that was vetted, so rather than just two PowerPoint slides saying, I reckon we can do this, you can use examples, you can draw on other companies that have done similar. And it was, it was really tough to actually get to a stage where we've raised enough capital and have our runway to be able to get to market was really, really stressful. So.
All right, Ken and Megan, your situation is a little bit different, but we're still talking about that critical resource of finance. So what are we doing in that initial stage? Are you relying on your personal savings? Are you relying on grants, sponsorships, investors, strategic partners, alternative income to support household expenses? What's that story looking like for both of you?
For us, as I mentioned earlier, what we were doing was I'm working full time, working on my MBA full time, and so making some money to pay for the mortgage, pay for the bills, pay for the business, and then every time there would be some money, put it to the side, save up for the next thing. So, for example, hire a lawyer, that was important, and then we can pay them to go through the process so we do it properly, and then from there get some NDAs created from a lawyer so then we could protect our business. So it was a lot of taking the money that I'm making through my work, reinvesting it back into the business. I'm a risk guy. I don't have a big risk appetite. So going out and taking a gamble, going to get loans from a bank or through some other agency or organization just really didn't make sense for me in my position at the time because I wasn't too sure where it would go. So I took a low risk process and just reinvested and then took the risk on going out on my own.
So we're a little bit different to both, or Circular PV Alliance is a bit different to both of Ken's and Gibran's situation. So we're really a lean operation. We're online. We don't have bricks and mortar. We don't have things and stuff. So we've written a report which we've got printouts of, but other than that, there were very minimal costs, and our ongoing operating costs are quite low. We the legal and accounting fees at the start is a few $1,000s to get going. So I, because I was championing the cause, I guess I had the benefit of the AIB MBA study at the time, and I understood that it was a worthwhile cause to pursue. So I understand that could be risky from the others that were in the group at the time, but I was happy to take that risk on board. So I put forward the money to actually get us started. So I guess depending on the situation, and our situation, a not-for-profit industry body, it was a very lean startup, just a few $1,000s in startup fees. And our ongoing mission since then has been to create that sustainable revenue source, which has led us to develop a service offering back to the industry, but maybe that will come up later.
Okay. You feel free to go into it now, though.
Okay, sure. So I guess we're structured just like other peak industry bodies like the Clean Energy Council or the Smart Energy Council, membership-based. We undertake research, so we have had funds in the form of research grants, but it's a real hard slog if you want to do it that way, be focusing on memberships and research. We've done a lot of research. I feel we've built a very solid foundation from there. So through that research, we identified there's a gap in solar energy as an industry in terms of supporting businesses and projects to embed circularity principles into how they are designed, planned, managed, and decommissioned at the end. So what we did was we developed a certification framework, the world's first circularity certification framework for solar energy projects. It's as much a service offering to the industry and to project developers as it is a reward for recognising steps taken to embed circularity principles and practices when there is a very weak or very diluted and inconsistent policy framework nationally to actually require anyone to do that. So we work with project developers, we look at their project, we help them design and craft their project with those circularity practices in mind. And then depending on how far they kick the can down the road and what they are able to achieve, we'll certify them, or if they do above and beyond, we give them an exceeds level of certification. And so at the moment, with the rate of the energy transition and change happening, waste management for decommissioned projects is a big topical issue. So being able to say your project is CPVA certified rounds out that waste management end of life decommissioning issue. It helps build social license, it de-risks projects, and it actually sets them up to function properly and efficiently when end of life kind of scenario happens. So like a hailstorm goes through and panels need to be decommissioned in a way. So it's helpful and it's not just a gimmick kind of thing.
Is anyone else feeling the passion come through that screen? I love it when you get on your passion train there, Megan. Well done. All right, I want to talk a little bit about risk. And Gibran, I know you talk about the risk appetite. I think that's very appropriate here. So a lot of people have ideas. Even the people who pre-registered for this webinar said, I'm waiting for the right idea, or how do I know if it's the right idea? Look, transforming ideas into sustainable ventures, it's a different challenge altogether, right? So we all understand the concept of risk versus reward, but effectively balancing that risk is critical. So Gibran, I want to jump to you for a moment. What were the, and I know there's many risks at the outset, but maybe if we can focus on one or two, what were the key risks that you faced in those early stages, and perhaps how you navigated them, leading to advice for our audience?
Yeah, great question, because it really is, everyone's got a different risk appetite. How comfortable you are with where you line that risk appetite spectrum is really important. I mean, the single biggest risk that we had starting Additive Surgical and starting the journey was the right people. You know, it's really tough in Australia. We do not have enough skills around manufacturing, particularly high-tech advanced manufacturing in medical devices, to be able to bring a medical device to market. You know, I can count on the one hand the people with the regulatory and quality know-how to take a printed device and put it through all of its verification and validation to get it to market. And it was just lucky for me that, you know, that two of these people were very good mates of mine, and, you know, without that highly skilled team, you know, I sort of just bring the people together, and I've got good broad knowledge across the entire spectrum, but the depth of knowledge needed, how deep you go into verification, validation to get a device to market, there's only a handful of people in Australia that can do it. So that was my biggest risk. You know, if I go all in on this, how do I make sure those 2, 3, 4 people that are brilliant at being able to bring it to market with those deep skills, how do I make sure that they're on this journey? And that's where you need to make sure that you have an appropriately skilled team, particularly for something that is so highly specialized. And that was my number one risk, you know. And I know when I was talking to some of my potential investors, that was probably their first question. You know, how do you know you can bring the right team to do this, and how do you know they're going to stay with you to be able to get this product to market? Because they know it's a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 year journey. And it was a really good question. So that was for me, that was probably the number one risk: how to get that team with the appropriate skills, and how do you get there? You know, so that was the biggest thing, and then also raising the capital. That was, you know, the other risk, that, you know, how do I prove that we can do this when there's not many companies in Australia that have bought Class 2B or Class 3 medical devices to a global market. You know, there was a little bit of doubt and apprehension that, well, what makes you think you can do it? Well, you know, what's your team like? How can you do this? And that was a risk as well, explaining a very detailed and intrinsic process to some investors around, well, this is the pathway it takes, this is exactly what we have to do, this is the timeline, this is the approximate budget. You know, it's a massive spreadsheet where a lot of these investors might understand the top line of it, but when you go deep into the specifics, you know, their eyes start to glaze over, and it's like, okay, I'm losing them. So that was also another risk, being such a high and technical driven process, to be able to get buy-in from external stakeholders because of the level of technicality. That was a massive risk as well.
I've got a question for you. It's evident that you have the capability and the network to make this happen. You've been in the industry for a good 15 years. Did you have unshakable belief in yourself to do this?
Yeah,
When you're having
100%.
conversations,
I had internal monologue, and I still do. It's like one of the downsides is my personal life's taken a beating. You know, it's been, I'm all in, right? And I guess that's one of the things. It's eyes wide open. Anyone looking to go into, you know, a medical device manufacturing business from a startup to get to a scale up. You know, the last 5 years of my life has been absolute chaos. You know, it's been, you know, I used to sleep well, and it used to be easy to have a balanced life and be a, you know, good husband and a good dad and a good everything. But then when you go all in on something like this, you're literally all in. It becomes your life. So, you know, that's been something that was hard to navigate around and hard to sort of to draw in. But for me, it's that unwavering belief that, well, I'm not going to do anything else. I'm there. I have to do this. I have to keep going. And that's that internal drive and that internal, that there's no other option, you know, particularly when you're not drawing a salary for a couple of years, and it's, you know, it's either success or bankruptcy. Which one are we going to do? You know, that's it. It makes you work pretty hard, right?
I call it beautiful chaos. All right, Megan, what were your core risks at the outset?
I guess just ensuring that people would want to, were as interested as I was at the time, to actually keep it burning, keep the project going. And we've got a brilliant board of directors, and their commitment is amazing. We all bring different skills and attributes, and we complement each other really well. So that risk was averted, which was great. But I think one of the things that happened a lot at the start was, so we were focused on solar energy, but a lot of people in the renewable space, you know, they're also dabbling in batteries or wind and things like that. And so we were constantly being asked, oh, and are you doing wind power as well? And what about batteries? And you should do that as well. It was constant. So the minute you say we're doing circular PV, they're like, oh, you should do circular wind and circular batteries and all that kind of stuff. And I think losing focus of like your main target, like that was a potential risk, and we've had to bat that off quite a lot consistently, and just stay focused in our lane of what we're doing. And it's not to say we won't ever maybe venture into those areas. I mean, they're very complementary and it could work, but what we need to do first is make sure that the framework we've got for Circular PV Alliance is solid and sustainable, and then maybe we can translate that across to, you know, other sectors that are similar but not necessarily the same. So that's a risk, and that's ongoing. So we've just got to constantly remind ourselves, because we get pulled in all sorts of different directions. Just stay the course, you know your lane.
You're going to jump in there, Ken, on your risks. And you know what? You did marketing management as your MBA specialization. You're in risk management advisory, but you know, you're such a brilliant marketing guy and voice as well. I'm sensing a clear value proposition coming in here somewhere.
Risk is my forte in terms of, you know, risk is everywhere. And most people that I've worked with in the past try to not talk about it, not embrace it. I try to get people to embrace it. So this is probably my passion point here, is talking about risk. When I go to events where people are socializing, you start talking about risk and people tend to shy away from talking about it. But where I'm in, the space I'm in, it's a quite saturated space. So you're competing with other businesses, you're competing with big corporations with deep pockets, with good marketing budgets. And so it's always that, you know, the risk is there that they have a bigger brand and people are addicted to the bigger brand and they're evaluating you. And so part of that whole process, you have to be patient in the brand evaluation. And so they're evaluating your authenticity, your capabilities, if you're going to be able to do it, your reputation, even the color of your brand palette, or how fast you respond to an opportunity. So all those things are kind of we say the marketing mix, but when we look at evaluation, there's how can you de-risk their evaluation process where the person says, okay, this business seems like one that I could trust to maybe test out with some smaller scopes of work. And then you're able to build up that reputation with the client. And so you're able to sort of navigate the risk of you're a new brand by doing smaller projects and in hopes that maybe there's larger ones in the future. One of the other risks that we often identify is losing intellectual property. So we'll have some people, some larger companies, some smaller companies, primarily larger ones, will reach out and invite to bid on a concept proposal. And so it's considered almost like an RFP, but it's really just kind of picking your brain. So when people typically reach out and say, I'd like to pick your brain, those are some of those red flags that kind of say like, okay, if I go and give you the strategy of how I would tackle this problem, and then they turn that into an RFP, or else they're just doing a gaps analysis. So the risk of giving too much information in the hopes that they're evaluating to maybe that you could qualify for a future project. So we've gotten really good at asking questions. So if they don't have a clear project definition, I've started being really clear in terms of asking like timelines, dates, numbers, some different people they've evaluated. And if they can't answer those questions, typically, then I kind of know they're probably fishing. And so those are some of the things I've gotten better at, understanding, because you're excited when a company reaches out to you, but not every company's, looking to actually buy. Sometimes they're just evaluating or window shopping. So you kind of have to know where to, not how much information you want to give out for free.
Sound advice there. A question that came through from the audience earlier is any blind spots to look out for? We've spoken a lot about risk and what we're looking out for. Is there any other blind spots that we haven't mentioned and you want to give some advice to our audience who are thinking about starting out?
Yeah, Alicia, that's a good question, and whoever asked it, it's it's wise, because I learned the hard way on a few things, and a couple of the key ones for me were get your documentation prepared early, because I did things the wrong way around a couple of times. Having a shareholders agreement to be able to have for review from potential investors, I didn't have that, right? So I was out raising capital. I had a suite of documents with here's our technology transfer, here's how we're going to do everything, here's the regulatory pathway, here's the process. So from a investor memorandum documentation suite, it was great, except I didn't even have a shareholders agreement. So, going through and trying to retrospectively implement a shareholders agreement once you've already got shareholders on board was an oversight on my behalf, right? And that was probably my one biggest learning, that having company constitutions quite easy, but a shareholders agreement, when you have multiple shareholders that have different ideas around, where should we be going, what should this company be doing, what would an exit look like, what's a special resolution look like, what do we all want from being a shareholder in the company? That's what the shareholders agreement's there for. And it was doing that after gaining shareholders and having a capital table that was becoming more and more complex. If I had my time again, I wish someone told me that, right? That one piece of advice: just get a shareholders agreement first before you raise capital. That would have been, for me, life-changing. So that's probably my biggest piece of advice. Another blind spot is, for me, it was regulatory, right? Because you've got, with medical devices, they're highly regulated. Your path to market in different countries is different. And I know this reasonably well, but I'm not an expert in this, right? So working with my regulatory experts that are part of the team and has been very enlightening, and it's given me a lot more intelligence and information about this. But it would have been good for me to do diligence for a couple more years around, hey, what markets accept what regulatory approvals, what are the nuances of those different approvals, how can we access different markets? So having a greater in-depth understanding of regulatory, and in lots of industries that are highly regulated, regulatory becomes a bit of a blind spot if that's not your focus. So they're probably my two biggies that I've learned the hard way.
Love that. One of my mentors talks about failing quickly when you're doing something new, because you don't know what you don't know. Megan.
So just my experience is a blind spot that I was really surprised at, honestly, were where detractors might have come from. And they're people that you would think would be supportive, but are actually kind of might see you as a bit of a competition in some way. So it's not the way I operate. So that caught me really off guard. I'm so collaborative, so open, so collegial, and I'm all about lifting everybody up and bringing everyone together to achieve outcomes collectively that benefit everyone. But what I became aware of was that some people can be quite defensive of what they perceive as being their patch. And if you're offering something that might be of benefit even to their patch, they might not want to participate or be a part of it. So I guess that was a real blind spot for me, and I still struggle with it, reflecting on it. Yeah.
Some blind spots for me would be clarifying terms and conditions. So I'm a people pleaser. I want to make people happy. I'm former government. Your job is to make your bosses happy. They give you a task. It takes 10 hours, takes 15 hours. You don't complain. Now, when you're in the private sector and you're working for a company and you're billable to an hourly line item, you have to really get disciplined in terms of where you put your hours and how much resources. And so that was when I was in the private sector. Now I'm on my own, so I don't have the billable hours. So we work with a flat rate, we work with a fixed fee in some cases. In some of those cases, one of the fixed fee items where you want to make your client happy and you're going to pivot where you need to pivot, but then scope creep comes in. And so some of those things where, then the project starts adding on, another layer that wasn't discussed in the initial meeting. So I think really getting just a detailed, okay, here's what we're going to do, here's what's in scope, what's out of scope. And if it's out of scope, then we can negotiate on a case by case basis. One of the other things, a blind spot where, I assumed, naive me, everyone has the good intentions. And when you start reading NDAs, and so when a client, or not a client, another person, a business partner, not even a business partner, another business says, hey, Ken would really like to work with you. Here's our NDA. So essentially, they have a form of power over you because it's their NDA. And so then you're becoming locked into what they want. So reading those really carefully, and that one line doesn't make much sense to me, and then you go back and they minimize it. And so really looking at it, and you have to ensure that that one line doesn't lock you out of the market, so you can't do one of your core services. And so while they might minimize it, it might be good to go to a mentor, a lawyer. I go to my lawyer in some cases when it's that technical. And in one of those cases, I would have actually not been able to do any work, which is one part of our business. So really making sure that I have good faith in people, but once NDAs and contracts start coming into play, I really read that now just to protect our business so we can keep growing where we want to grow.
Fantastic. Another question that came through earlier is business plans. Take yourselves back to when you started out. I'm going to look for your non-verbals first. Did we all have a business plan? I'm not going to make any assumption or does this need to be a question? Okay, so I'll tell you the question. You can frame how you want to answer it. Business plans, for those who have them at the outset, how detailed should they be? There's a lot of perfectionists in the room. Are you doing a super detailed one, or are you keeping it a little bit agile to remain open to those emergent issues that come about? Gibran.
Yeah, great question. I mean, and this is where my entrepreneurship MBA really helped, right? Because my final project was bringing everything together, and pretty much every subject was dedicated to this startup that I wanted to create called Additive Surgical. So when it came to having a fully fledged business plan, that was, I think, my 12th subject in the MBA, which was, it had 62 references and it had so many charts, and it was over detailed. It was great. Don't get me wrong. I loved it and I got great marks for it. But then translating that into the real world, it was great, but it was almost too much, right? Like to have so much detail and things change and you have to pivot a little bit. You have to be nimble. And in my, my master business plan that was, the culmination of my entire MBA, it was pretty rigid. It was like, right, I've got this amazing business plan that's, 142 pages and all these appendices, and then implementing that, you can't do that. And so we had to pivot on a few things. There are a few things we had to add and take out, but I think for me personally, it was I went in with everything, and then had to peel bits back and pivot where I needed to. But it was better to be over prepared than under prepared. And with the level of detail in my business plan, initially, looking at raising some pre-seed capital, it was great to have all those documents, a 5-year financial forecast, value proposition, all my canvases and statements, and to have all of that summarized, and any question that came up, I could refer to my own documents that I had created. It was great right at the start, but then I quickly learned that you need flexibility. You need to be nimble. If you're sort of right, that's the business plan and I'm sticking to it, you're going to be in strife. Things change and you need to change as fast as those external environmentals, which you have no control over. You need to pivot with those when they change. So yeah, for me, in summary, it was I went overkill and then I had to peel it back and sort of jump and be nimble as necessary.
There's some project which is for those outside the ARB community. It's the 12th subject in which our students can do essentially whatever they want, a research project, but there has to be a business outcome, and in your case it was a business plan for a new idea. All right, Ken and Megan.
So I think our business plan was a Miro board, which was just crazy. So many different ideas on it about, because we were just a working group at the start, and we had to work out what were we going to do. We want to solve this problem of panels ending up in landfill, but what was our role going to be? Were we going to be a for-profit business, for purpose, draw an income and distribute that profit to ourselves as a business? Maybe we're going to be recycling solar panels or testing and reusing them. Or what were we going to play in the policy side of things? Were we going to be an enabler for the business ecosystem? And we decided to do the latter, to be an enabling organisation to get the business ecosystem to thrive, because at the time there was no business ecosystem. So there's no point being in business in an ecosystem in an industry that doesn't exist, right? So we're like, okay, well, let's help support it and be an enabler. So that's why we went down the not-for-profit public entity route. And since then, we've refined our business planning somewhat. So every year we set strategic plans, I suppose. A strategic plan, there we go, it's a plan for the year. So what are our targets and goals going to be for the year? And then we measure ourselves at halfway through the year. Are we just a very simple traffic light, red, yellow, green? Where are we up to? How are we tracking? What do we need to do? We report back to our members on how we're going and ask for help along the way. So I guess a messy Miro board helped us galvanize what we wanted to do, which we've then kind of refined into our own form of business plan and setting those strategic goals for the year. And that's where we kind of refined our certification framework from, and we're building from there.
Yeah, for Strat first, where we really started out was who are we? What's going to make us different? I think there was one core goal that I had was how do I help people be proactive and help them make their business case? And that was always the mission. So there's ways to de-risk it through good data, through good storytelling, through artwork, through different ways of doing things. So did I start off with this really fine-tuned, detailed business plan about, where we would go in Q2 and 2 years from now? No, I didn't. It was a moving, living, breathing document where actually where I found what worked well for me in my space was doing market segmentation planning. And so who's my audience? What do they do? What time do I market to them? What platform are they on? Are they on LinkedIn, Twitter? So I do artwork. I'll just pick on that one. I get a far better response on LinkedIn if I tie it to a business case than I do a different social media platform. So I use LinkedIn, and so that's where I put my energy. So it's been sort of trial and error of, okay, this is where I know I need to put my energy. Once it comes to the business planning, so because I was able to, take that gamble, invest in the business. I didn't have to report to back to banks or a board or different other groups. So I actually had mentors along the way where I would test ideas, and they would be critical, and they would, as if they were bored, and drill into it till I was discouraged from the idea. Then I would move that and pivot that from that goal. Now that we've had I'll say from when I left the corporate sector into running the business, we have just about a full year cycle. So going back and evaluating and saying, okay, we have 3 core pillars. Which ones were most profitable over the other and why? And so kind of evaluating which one, maybe pillar 3 is actually more profitable than pillar 1. So not to get rid of things, just to do some realignment, pivot with the services. In Canada, we're dealing with tariffs, so some of the changes within geopolitical, within communities, within government. So we pivot here and there. So our business plan essentially is living, breathing. It pivots frequently, and in this day and age, that's just where we have to be with it and change with it.
Thank you for each being real. What I love about this panel is that you all have very different perspectives that you're coming from, and that's the whole point of this panel webinar. Ken, I'm going to stick with you for a minute. Now, the role of the MBA, so I'm just going to give some insights. According to our ARB Alumni Insights, 96% of alumni applied their MBA learnings directly into their job or business, but 95 reported increased confidence, love that one, and 81% said that it helped advance their career. So, Ken, I'm going to ask you the question, and then we're going to jump to Megan, because Megan, you'll be thinking about our final subject, project students, when it comes to you. But Ken, starting with you, what role did your MBA play in your startup?
Yeah, a few roles. It helped me really understand people and personalities and power structures. And so everything I learned in my MBA was, okay, we're working with systems and we're working with people who are thriving or sometimes afraid to make a recommendation in their own teams. So we're working with those systems and people. We're working with different quarter goals in terms of quarter 1, quarter 3, quarter 4 budgets. So we have to pivot. And so part of that pivoting requires me to be really patient. And so sometimes a business deal might not happen for 6 months or 8 months, and they're evaluating. So where the MBA really helped me in my business life is be patient, not take things personally. There, you have emotions. We're all people. We want to make that business deal, but that business deal doesn't always land on our lap. And so businesses have an option to go to somebody else. And so me, I can't take that personally. I could be upset, but I can't go and voice that my being upset online, because this is business. And so some of those things have just taught me to be patient. And had I not done it, my MBA specialized in marketing management, I probably wouldn't be as okay with the process, but now I know what the process is. There's a lot of evaluation that happens. And so I'm happy I've taken those courses that let me know the evaluation process for procurement.
Thanks, Ken. I think the word that's popped up a few times so far is pivot, and I think MBA can give you that value in being able to pivot. So when I started my MBA, I was working as a town planner, so nothing to do with solar energy, and I started my MBA to help progress my career. I honestly thought it would be a tick and flick. I'll just do it. It'll be some nice letters to have on a business card, and it might open a few doors. But after I got started and I began to tailor my assignments towards this emerging area of interest I had in solar panel recycling, I started to realize I was beginning to understand the industry and the issues around it a lot more. I could understand the business ecosystem, and I could have informed conversations with other stakeholders or people in the industry about it. I wrote my thesis on solar panel recycling as an emerging business opportunity in Australia, which not only gave me credibility to my industry peers, but it was essential for me to know and understand when the moment came that starting CPVA was actually a worthwhile cause, and it had legs. And so it gave me the confidence to do that, be that champion, put the money in at the start to get going, and led me to be able to pivot away from being in that former career into something new. And I believe it will help me again in future if I ever want to pivot into something else.
Yeah, I've spoken on this briefly before, but yeah, without the confidence that my entrepreneurship MBA gave me to see that this was a feasible reality, there's no way I would have taken the plunge and just gone all in, you know. But to spend that sort of 2-3 years of sacrificing nearly every weekend, I remember sitting up at my dining room table till 2-3 in the morning, most weekends for 2 or 3 years, a lot of personal sacrifice, right? Just getting through these assignments. And then sort of it dawned on me at the end of it, I looked at everything and I thought, now I've done these 12 subjects over the last 2.5, 3 years about this 3D printing medical device company. I reckon I can actually do this, you know. So it really was, I guess it's those confidence builders, right? And then, you know, I started talking to some clinicians and, you know, a couple of my close friends who have this deep experience in quality and regulatory. And then it was the combination of, you know, having done the MBA and the full broad spectrum planning, and then the team that I knew I could bring together that were experts in every individual area. I was just like, yeah, we've got to go for it. We've got to risk it and give it that chance. But without the MBA, I just wouldn't have done that. You know, I would have thought about it a lot and thought, what if? And you know, one of my mentors, he talks to me quite a lot, and it's one of the quotes I really like from him is, "If not now, when?" Do you know what I mean? And it was a little bit about doing my MBA. It's like, well, if not now, when? I'm not getting younger. You know, I want to do an MBA. Well, if not now, when? And then it was around taking the plunge and just going for it. And, you know, that term and phrase pops up in my head quite a lot, that if not now, when?
What powerful words. Can we end on that quote? Now, we are going to come to a close shortly. Is there anything left urgently unsaid from the panel that you want to make sure we mention?
Can I just throw something in there? A follow-up line to that saying, Gibran, I've heard is, if not us, then who? So, or if not you, then who? So if you're watching this webinar and you've got this idea and you're doing your MBA, I think we can all suffer a little bit of imposter syndrome, and we've just got to really get out of our own way, get the MBA, get that confidence, and be prepared and willing to take that leap, because we've all got our own little sphere of influence and our own genius zone, and you know, the MBA can help really tap into that and give you the confidence to be the person making that change that you want to see.
I can just hear the marketing team now. They're doing a graphic with the quotes on here. I can see it. Sorry, Gibran.
Megan, I really like that, and it is so true, because it's that if not you, who? It makes a lot of sense, and it does tap in with that if not now, when. And there's opportunity everywhere, and this is something that I sort of look at now. There's opportunity everywhere. You know, we've had to pivot quite a lot to make sure we get to market. And another quote that sort of resonates with me is, opportunity is the enemy of focus, right? You know, you've got to be focused to get there. There's all this great opportunity. You can run around and try grab it, but then you lose your focus, right? So opportunity is the enemy of focus, and you need to be very deliberate in your focus. And if you do pursue any opportunities that are outside of your focus, it needs to be a bloody good reason to do that, you know?
All right, shall we bring the webinar to a close? I love ending with a good quote. Team, you've been fantastic today, and I want to thank the audience for tuning in as well. Look, turning an idea into a sustainable reality, no small feat. It takes a combination of the passion, the right skill set, some strategic risk-taking, a strong support network. You know, we've all heard the journey from ideation to execution, full of challenges, but it's through overcoming those challenges that true innovation is born. So the insights shared by our panelists really do highlight the incredible impact of combining bold ideas with the right strategies, and then that power of confidence we heard a few times, and persistence in the face of risk. So your journeys are a real testament to what's possible when we embrace both the challenges and rewards of entrepreneurship. Ken, Gibran, Megan, you've been absolute legends. To everyone, thank you for joining us for the Career Under Construction webinar series.